Okay, so now what we need to talk about is we need to start thinking about, well, how we're going to identify different risks in the organisation. And what are the things that can go wrong and how we're going to find out what they are. So the obvious thing that we can start to do is by having conversations. And the first people we need to have a conversation with is our internal staff. Okay, our internal staff there, okay, so most of your risk management processes in most organisations are going to be internal process. Okay, so it won't be an external person coming in. It'll be done generally within your business and generally done within your organisation, because that's pretty much what you need to do most of the time, as long as you've got the skills and ability to do it. And the first people we need to talk to is your staff, okay? And it's essential that you talk to your existing staff in order to assist with the identification of risk. Okay, that'll make sure it's being done effectively, that different areas of expertise are being brought together and different views are considered, okay? So entry-level staff, they're dealing with the nuts and bolts every day. If you're running a restaurant, the guys in the kitchen, they're in the kitchen every day. They're working with the knives, they're working with the hot plates. They're thinking about spoilage, they're thinking about all this stuff every day. That's what they're focused on. Okay, so they can bring that level of expertise and that level of skill and tell you what's going wrong there. Your restaurant manager will have a different view because they're not working with those things all the time, but they are working with your customers every day to understand what's happening in the customer space. They're thinking about business risk, about people who may or may not be coming to work and the staff numbers sufficient, etc. Okay, the bar manager will have yet another different view because they're obviously working with the responsible service of alcohol every day and monitoring what's happening there. Okay, so different people in your organisation are going to have different levels of understanding and different levels of expertise and different sort of recognition of problems. So you want to draw on as wide a group of people as possible to make sure you're getting those broad opinions. Okay, so there's a number of techniques you can use to make sure you're maximising your conversations with these people to get all the information out of them. And look, and it's as simple as sitting together with them saying brainstorming. Okay, so you can have a brainstorm session where you're asking people what can go wrong and how it's all going to work and, what have they seen or how could we do this better or, there's a whole lot of different conversations you can see there. You can also have the suggestion box. Okay, so if people see it, they drop write the stuff on the thing, throw it in the suggestion box, and then, you clear that out. That can be really good for anonymous, okay? Sometimes they just go, oh, this is my complaint, grumble, grumble, and they get an opportunity to say that anonymously, which can sometimes be a bit of a help. You might have project meetings, okay? If you're running a project, okay? Meet up from time to time, get all the stakeholders together, have a bit of a conversation. Okay, guys, what's working, what's not? How can we fix it? What are the problems we're getting? Customer feedback forms are another great source of info. Okay, you can get a heap of customer feedback forms. Customers are going to tell us what's wrong, what they find about the product, what aren't they sure about, did something break, is that going to be reputation damage, have we got a faulty good or faulty service or some of our batches bad. Okay, so customer feedback, really, really important and really good, because if it does go wrong and the customer gets to give feedback, they'll usually be a little less angry. Okay, and then we can also have one-on-one discussions, okay, where we're actually talking face-to-face with people rather than the group environment, which can be really good for getting people to come and actually have a conversation. External, if we're going to go for external staff, external. Okay, if we're going to go for external people, we might bring in workplace health and safety consultants, we might bring in risk management people. And what they're really there to do, external people are there to bring in skills that we don't already have in-house. Okay, so the advantage to them is that they can help fill a skills deficiency. The other benefit sometimes to external staff is they're neutral. Okay, they don't really know the business, they don't really know the people, they're not going to try and hide or protect anything, they're just there to report on the facts, and that can be really handy. Okay, so they're not there to hide things, there's no politics behind it, they're an external person, they're coming in to deliver that and then they're moving on. Okay, so with all those benefits, there are costs to that though, and we need to think about how much time and money and effort do these things take, and what we're trying to do is maximise the return on that. So we need to think about, it's great to use a risk consultant, but if it's going to cost us a lot of money and they're not going to bring a lot to the table, do I really want to do it? If I'm going to do a brainstorm, I obviously don't want to do it every day. I just want to do it, on a regular basis. Okay, so that we're not spending heaps of time and money trying to fix very small problems. Okay, it just turns into it's a waste of time and money if we get too carried away and aren't really achieving the goals. So how do we get maximum effect for the minimum resource cost use the internal staff to get as much information as possible, and really look at external people when we need either a neutral viewpoint or if we identify we don't have the skills to do it ourselves. Okay, so what we need to do then is we're also going to think about part of getting this done is starting to research. Okay, so things we're going to start to research there is identify what could happen. So we're asking these people, okay guys, what could go wrong and how and why it could happen. So what would cause it to happen? Okay, and at this stage, as we're going through doing our brainstorming, getting our suggestions and having a project meeting, it's necessary to examine all the possible sources of risk, okay? So what we're really trying to do is get the biggest possible viewpoint we can, as much information as we can, so we can start to work out what crosses over, and then we can start to examine it in a bit more detail and apply those resources through our risk managers. All right, cool, that's the first part. So different sources of risk, okay? So while we're going through identifying risk, we need to start thinking about what are the sources, okay? And there are a few generic risk categories such as legal or financial and natural events, etc. But we need to start to break it down a little bit further. So we might start talking about commercial. Okay, so we might start talking about commercial and legal relationships. Okay, so this is about our relationships. Okay, could there be, brand association, brand damage, what happens if we lose them, etc. We might also start thinking about economic circumstances. So economic risk. And a lot of that's going to come out of our STEEP analysis we would have already done. We need to think about human behaviour. Okay, and in human behaviour, we often look at things like discrimination, sexual harassment, whatever it is, but also things like negligence, getting people to do what they're supposed to do. Okay, that's a really hard one because people do weird things, trust me. Okay, natural events. So we need to think about what are the natural events that occur around us. Okay, and that can be things like, starting to look at, well, do the weather patterns affect us? What if there's freak rain? What if? So that's all about the environment around us. I need to think about the political risk. Okay, so what's happening in the broader politics, whether it's on a local, a state, or a federal level. Okay, so what's happening in that space. I need to also start to consider technology and technological issues. Okay, and that one straight again, once again, the political and the technology, they're straight out of your STEEP analysis. Okay, so you've got heaps of these already going along. You need to think about your management activities. So the management activities and their controls. Okay, so in other words, are our processes right? Do we have the right processes for our business? So are we targeting the right things? Do we have policies, procedures, that sort of stuff in place to deal with all the things we need to deal with? And then just general individual activities. Okay, so when I talk about individual activities, that is rather than just our business as usual, are we doing an event or do we have something going on? For yourself, like a birthday party. It's an individual activity, it's a simple thing. Are you planning an activity that you're going to do, okay, as opposed to your business as usual? All right, so these are the sort of things that we might look at. So it's our commercial risk. So what about relationships and, do we lose customers, etc.? Where might that happen? New competitors coming in, etc. Economic, what's happening in the environment around us on the economic level? Interest rates going up, interest rates going down. What's the exchange rate doing? How does that work? Human behaviour, so what might our people be doing or our customers be doing? Our customers, are they happy? Are they stealing from us? All that sort of good gear. Natural events, so think about the weather cycles, weather patterns and all that sort of gear. The political changes that are going on a local, a state and a federal level. Okay, that can also start to affect the environment. If you have a look at your local council website, they put out a lot of the things on local development plans, so you can start to see what are they going to be doing over the next 10 years. And then once you read that, you can say, is there a risk to me there? Thinking also about your technology. Okay, so once again, are we up to date? Are there any things emerging out of there we need to think about? Management activities, do we have good policy, procedure, control? Are our managers managing our people correctly? And then the individual activities we're taking on. So what are the things we're doing that we might need to look at? Okay, so from that, we start to get a bunch of research methods. We might be starting to look at market research. Okay, market research is going to tell us a little bit about our human behaviour. It'll tell us a little bit about the customers and a lot of the political stuff as well. By doing market research, we can gather data or statistical information within our organisation. So, do we have information already there? Do we have stats? Do we know how many customers come in? Do we know how many times these things have happened? Okay, so gathering our own statistics or looking at someone else's. We can do public consultation. particularly if we want to get past, human behaviour or some of the, probably political, but also individual activities. So actually dealing with the public and inviting them to comment. I know that in local communities where they're doing a lot of property development, they'll have an open shop where they'll put a display of what they're going to build and invite the public to come and comment. That way, they can find out early whether anyone's going to object and whether they're going to end up with a political problem later, because those people, if they can't complain now, will just go to the council. Okay, we might actually examine any paperwork from previous activities, so any lessons learned. If we've done this activity in the past, what happened? And also just thinking about going through and identifying any other sources of information that might be out there. Are there any case studies we've seen that might be similar to our business or our activities, to see what's happened for other people out there? Okay, so these are a bunch of things to look at that. Cool. Okay, so to make sure that we can identify those risks, we've talked about all the different people we can talk to. We've looked at the different categories of risk. So a couple of different techniques to gather information. Okay, one of the things we can do is, form a checklist. Okay, we need to put our risks on a checklist so we can, start to deal with them that way. We can start to look at judgments. Okay, so looking at your past behaviours, etc. What do your people know? Here's a checklist. Let's look at each department. Let's look at each person. Let's look at that. We can start to rely on personal judgment about what we've seen in the past, what we know works, the experience and records we've got there. We can develop workflow charts. Okay, so we can start particularly talking about processes. So how does our business work? Okay, if I pour information in up here, customer comes in, then what happens, then what happens, then what happens, then what happens, then what happens. Okay, so we can actually follow through and find out where a problem might occur along the way. Flowcharts or decision-making charts, pretty good. The other thing we can start to do is, obviously, as I say, we can get our brainstorms together. Okay, another great way of gathering up information. And once again, along with the flowcharts, is just your system analysis. Now we know the customer's coming in, and then this is happening, and this is happening, and this is happening. Decision-making tree. Well, what's the system analysis? So how do the systems that then deal with that, how do they work, or where does that information go? What's going to happen? We can also do scenario analysis. Okay, so we, literally, what's the question, right? Okay, so if a customer comes in and wants to do this, what happens? Or a person turns up on Friday afternoon at 3 p.m, goes up to our staff and says the following, what happens next? Okay, and we start to do a scenario and we play it out. Now we can have, two people doing it. We can have an evolving scenario. You can sort of role play it or war game it out any way you want, but we're doing a walkthrough, talk through, and then we go, and then, oh, that should happen, but we don't have a policy. Great, let's fix it. Okay, and then you can also use systems engineering techniques for the engineers amongst you. Okay, you might get down a policy of doing that, but as I say, I'm a huge fan of doing scenario analysis, which is the what if. Like, okay, now we think we know how it's supposed to work, let's actually play it out. Okay, let's take that and let's role play it. Okay, and one person can be the manager, another person can be the staff member or the customer or whatever relationships we want to have, and let's start, punching through and see what happens. And, what'll happen is if you've got any problems, very quickly you go, oh, okay, that's not looking so good, or here's where some of our problems might be. And then you can take it away and start fixing it. Okay, so what we're really trying to get down to, if nothing else, is just to have some sort of organization about the way you're going into this. Okay, don't just try and wing it and throw a bunch of bits and pieces down the paper. What we're really trying to get to is a methodical approach for gathering and dealing with the information. Okay, there has to be something so you can track it back and say, how did we come to this position? And if we find a problem, well, what other things is it going to affect? Okay, so spending some time really thinking through how you want to deal with it, how you're going to gather the information, how you're going to speak to people, get those communications out there. Okay, this is going to lead to a really robust picture of knowing exactly what happens in your business, how it happens, when it happens, and where it happens, and then what could go wrong with it and what might that affect. And if you do that, you're halfway there on your risk management. That's the hard part, all right? But it's hard, But if you're organised, it can be very, very straightforward. Okay, so get organised, think about what you want to know, think about the scope of the risk management in your organisation, who's going to be involved, get all those stakeholders involved, hear them out, find heaps of ways they can contribute, get as much information as possible, and then start filtering it down through some of these techniques so you can really start to get a really good picture of what's happening in your business, and you'll have done a great job of identifying risk. And knowing what the problem is half of it, because if you don't know it and you haven't seen it, you can't deal with it and you can't fix it. All right, great. Most important part, now done.